Hey, Val, thanks for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Gustavo Modena. I'm a senior product manager here at Microsoft. I'm part of the Azure Network Security team, focused on customer experience team, working with Azure Firewall, Web Application Firewall, and DDoS. This is our team. So in this call today, we have Andrew Matu, David Frazee, Mohit Kumar, Salim Desiu, Shabazz Sheikh, and Tobias Tolorin. And we are going to answer all the questions that we received on the tech community. And then if the time permits, we are going to answer the questions that we have on the chat.
Sounds great. So let me just take over with a share and see what the audience have been asking us on through the tech community. Okay, I believe I'm sharing. And let's look at the first question here. Okay, so looks like the first question is regarding the Azure Firewall and the high availability solution. Let's see who from you can answer that one. Would be great.
Yeah, I can answer that one. So just to give a little bit of context, right? The Azure File is our cloud native solution, our Azure as a service available in Azure. And by default, when you deploy the Azure File, it's going to be running first off, right? Azure File, when you deploy it, it's based on Azure virtual machine scale set instances. So when you deploy it, you're gonna have at least 2 instances running in the backend, right? So the deployment is an active solution, so it's not an active passive. The active solution is available in its the Azure File gradually scales based on throughput and CPU consumption, right? So for example, let's say you just deploy the Azure File and you have your traffic going through it. And then, as the traffic increases, then the CPU utilization and the throughput starts to increase as well. And then when it gets to 60%, the VMSS behind it starts deploying new instances to handle all the traffic coming through the Azure File, again based on CPU utilization and throughput. In the same way as it is scale out, it also is scaling. So if your file is not, the CPU and throughput consumption is not at 60%, so it starts decreasing up to 20%, that's when the Azure File will decrease the number of instances, and then going back to, let's say 3 instances, or even going back to 2 active instances in the backend. The only difference that we want to highlight here is that today we have 3 SKUs for Azure File: basic, standard, and premium SKU. The scaling process only applies for standard and premium SKU. The basic SKU, it has 2 active instances by default, but it doesn't scale out based on the number of the throughput and CPU consumption. And in regards of the high availability, we do recommend deploying Azure File in multiple availability zones. So in case something happens with the, let's say, for example, zone 1, you still have your deployments, spread across different zones. So the SLA on your Azure File will also increase a little bit when you have the deployment, spread across different availability zones.
Great. Thank you so much for this thorough answer. And the next question is on whether it is recommended to have a firewall in front of the WAF, since we know that it has disadvantages like the visibility and the tuning of WAF policy. So it would be great if somebody can elaborate on this, providing the answer to this question.
Yeah, sure. I can take that one. So there's no like single word answer there. It basically depends on what the infrastructure is. So we have to consider a few things, like whether we have web-based traffic or it's regular non-web-based traffic, HTTP, TCP traffic, or we have both. So it depends on that. So when we consider deploying WAF and firewall, we have generally three ways in which we can deploy. We can have them parallelly set up, like WAF handling the web-based traffic and the firewall handling the TCP traffic that is coming into the Azure environment. But when we look for a specific recommendation here, so we need to see what is our requirement. So requirement when we talk about the internet inbound traffic, are we willing to have TLS inspection there? So at that point of time, if we need TLS inspection, we definitely need to have app gateway WAF at the front. And similarly, if we want to preserve the client IP of the source host, at that point of time, we also need to have a app gateway WAF or a front door WAF at that point of time at the front. So generally speaking, having WAF at the front will give you more advantages in these scenarios that I've just mentioned. But having firewall at the front would have the threat intelligence capability, which would deny some malicious IPs or well-known domains and everything. But we do have that in WAF as well as like a bot protection mechanism, which is also based off of threat intelligence. So it totally depends on what kind of traffic that we are processing. That's the first thing. And the second thing is if we have specific requirements like TLS inspection and preserving the client IP, going with the WAF at front would be a better option.
Thank you, Shahbaz. And perhaps maybe a follow-up question to that, or maybe not. There's a question regarding the whether will the Azure Firewall support application rules on ports other than 80 and 443?
Yeah, and I can take that one, Valen. So the Azure Firewall today, when it's creating the application rules, so it's really for HTTP, HTTPS, and MS SQL. So this is typically ports 80, 443, and 1433. But we're really not limited to the ports 80 and 443 when it comes to HTTP and HTTPS. So there are features like explicit proxy that you could use, and well-known proxy ports are like 8081 and 8443. So you can define application rules with these not so well-known ports, but you are still tied to the protocol of HTTP, HTTPS, and MS SQL. You don't have to use explicit proxy either to utilize non-well-known ports, as long as your web server is listening on this port that's not 80 or 443. So as long as it's listening and it can handle the traffic, then you can define the application rule as, let's say, HTTP:8123. And then so that will work. So application rules does allow you to kind of define some not so well-known ports, but you still have to utilize the protocol of HTTP, HTTPS, and MS SQL.
Thank you, David. We'll move on into the next question. So the next question here is, there has been a scenario provided, and I'm not going to read that out, but they would like to know in the above scenario, how is the IDPS firewall certificate configured? And maybe somebody can tackle that one.
Yeah, sure thing. I can take that on, Valan. So here we are seeing a scenario. We have application gateway and Azure Firewall Premium. This is actually one of our supported scenarios. And what you get with this scenario is what we call end-to-end TLS inspection or encryption. So you do have visibility into encrypted traffic. So Azure Firewall Premium supports the TLS inspection, which will decrypt the traffic, scan it for any threats using IDPS, and then re-encrypt it back to its destination. In terms of the certificate usage, the Azure Firewall Premium uses intermediate certificates. So that's one thing that you require, the intermediate certificate. And for this, of course, most well-known certificate authorities cannot give you that intermediate certificate because it has their private key. So we do usually, as a best practice, encourage you to use enterprise PKI certificate that you generate within your own enterprise. With this, you can use it within the Azure File. There's also the scenario you can use auto-generated certificates within the Azure File TLS inspection settings. So with that, I should be able to intercept and do the TLS inspection. Just also to mention in the scenario that put in application gateway SKU1. I'm not sure if that is version 1, but we do encourage our customers out there to go to the latest application gateway version, which is gateway version V2. And then for the last part, where they asked whether they need to put the firewall in the backend. So what happens in this scenario, you have application gateway firewall, and then your application, you'll still have within your application gateway, the backend pool being the application or the service. What happens, we usually use what we call user-defined routes, so that traffic going from the application gateway passes to the Azure File for further inspection before it goes to the backend.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, looks like this was a two-folded question, so thanks for answering both. The next question is, can you make a custom body inspection rules with WAF? For instance, if the request body contains some value, allow or block connection.
Yeah, Valen, so I got that one here. So when it comes to custom rules for body inspection with WAF, absolutely. So you will be able to utilize a custom rule to check within the request body. So you can create a match variable, which it could either be post arguments or it could be request body itself. And then so these two match variables will look into the actual body of the request. Let's say it's like a post or a put. So now it's going to have some type of body. That request will go through. You'll be able to create a match variable to that. You also have different capabilities when it comes to the operator. So if you have contains, equals any, but you can also use like regex when it comes to the operator as well. So if there's a specific pattern that you're trying to find within a request body, you can use a regex pattern to put into the custom rule. You can also do some transformations as well. So a transformation is going to be some type of change that has been done to the request before it is checked against the rules. So you can do uppercase, you can do lowercase, you can do decoding and encoding of the request that comes in. So you will have the ability to inspect the body when it comes in using the custom rules, and you will have the option to do an action of either allow or block on the WAF for application gateway. In the WAF for Azure Front Door, you'll have the extra ability to do a redirect to another site if it were to match some type of values.
Thank you, David. And now we have the last question regarding the tech community, and it goes like this. So will we be having Backbased ACLS for firewall or VPNs? And there's a scenario here given, but then there's also a question regarding features and roadmaps. So I just wanted to remind our audience before one of you provides the answer to the RBAC one. So because this is a public webinar and we cannot discuss anything that is under NDA. So for upcoming features and roadmap plans, you can always sign up for our Microsoft Cloud Security Private Community Program. And this is basically where you can make a difference in helping us shape our products together. And I'll post that link here shortly. So who from you will tackle the last tech community question?
I think I can take this one. So just to bring some more context, like to the question. So from my understanding, so this is like user-based, like for user-based rules, or at least what other vendors call it. So Basically, like, like from the scenario there, it's, like if a user coming like, from on-site or from some VNet, they cannot allow like access by using a rule to, VNet 2, 3. And the same thing, like maybe for other user, they can like enter like, go to VNet 2, but not VNet 5. So this feature is not available on the Azure Firewall, and as Valen mentioned, like if you want information, and then it's good to join the private community. Probably the best workaround, like right now, or easiest way really to manage this kind of access is to use the IP groups, right? So basically, you can create like a few IP groups, put put the IP addresses that like for specific users in these IP groups that you're using, and then implement these IP groups in the firewall rules where you want to use them, so that those users from these source IPs can access or be denied access to specific VNets or destinations that you choose, right? So right now, probably the best way to to use it is to use IP groups. And yeah, this is at least like probably the best workaround, I think, for now.
Thank you, Salim. So we completed with the tech community pre-submitted questions, and as they had the priority before we tackle the ones that were posted here during the live session, although I see that the team has been doing a great job on answering them, I'm going to try to find some that were not already answered. So there's a question, and it goes like, my only question is what study path I must take to become an Azure Cloud Security Engineer. This is a very broad, maybe somebody can provide some guidelines on that. And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so maybe I can give an answer to this one. I mean, probably, I mean, so there's the there is the 500 certificate, which goes like into different security topics, and it's pretty like encompassing like a lot of different security services in Azure. But then there's also the cloud cloud engineer, which also has some topics on the, like, for example, on Azure Firewall, on the networking side, and a lot of network security topics are also included or covered in that certification, right? So from my opinion, at least these two, like 500 and the network engineer, are probably the best. And then there is, of course, the architect, right, which goes like more deeper, and it's for more like senior people. But then that could be like a good way to go. But that's, yeah, at least from my experience.
Thank you, Salim. Okay, let's see here. Next question.
Hey, Valid. So I got a question here that I was just about to answer in the chat, but I think I could probably verbalize it.
Cool.
Yeah, so the question is, does the WAF change the source IP address before it forwards the traffic to the backend server? So that's a really good question. So the source IP does get changed whenever you send that request through the WAF on Azure Application Gateway or Azure Front Door, but it's not necessarily the WAF itself that's changing the source IP. It's going to be either that application gateway or the Azure Front Door. In the instance of application gateway, what will happen is it will take on a new source IP of the private IP of whatever instance of the application gateway will handle that request. So you'll see it come through your backend server, your backend site, if it's all internal, as a private IP, something that's been configured within that subnet for the Azure Application Gateway. Unless the backend is some type of public endpoint, then you'll see the source IP as the public IP of the Application Gateway. In this instance, though, there will be an x404 header that will be appended to the request that will have the original source IP. So if you need to see the original source IP and track that down, the Application Gateway will append that to the request. When it comes to the Azure Front Door, it does the same, but it will not use any type of private IP. It will use what's called the Azure Front Door backend type IP addresses. If you're using like NSGs or some type of service tags, you'll see this as Azure Front Door.backend. You can utilize this. This is going to be our whole robust group of IPs that we use for the Azure Front Door when it comes to probing and to sending requests. But yes, this will also append an X404 header as well to add the true source IP. And you will be able to see this in the logs for the web application firewall logs for application gateway and the front door. You will still see the true source IP when it first hits that WAF.
Thank you, David. We have another high availability question, sorry, regarding active HA. How is traffic flow sessions handled?
Yeah, I can take that one as a follow-up question. So again, right, our Azure File is a stateful file, so we don't share the state of the connections between the instances. So let's say, for example, in case of you have an application which has a connection established, going through the Azure File. So in case the instance handling that connection, is scaled in or decommissioned, then the application will the instance will enter in a drain connection mode. So that way, new instance cannot be established to that instance. And then when a new traffic flow goes in, it will try to connect to another instance active behind the Azure File. So the connection states are not shared between the instances, and then for the case of the new instances being included to the pool, when new instances are added, new connections flows are going to be distributed, based on the load balance, load distribution between the instances, and then connections will be established to these new instances deployed.
Thank you, Gustavo. We have a question on, do you plan any WAF learning mode, quote unquote, that would recommend rule adjustments for our application and the one-click application to the WAF policy?
Maybe I can take this one. So Valen, I think this looks like more of a roadmap question.
Okay.
Probably something we can't share, but we do have a blog post we recently shared which talks about how to tune it, best practices for WAF, because we hear a lot of people asking for how to tune it for their applications and stuff. So we can share that. We can share the blog post links, and I think it's definitely a valuable resource that whoever is tuning their WAF, they can use it and benefit from it.
Great, thank you. It would be great if somebody can share the blog, and yeah, this is a great feedback. Although as we can't share much on the roadmaps here in this call, as mentioned earlier. Thank you, Salim, for that. Okay, so moving on to the next one. Having to choose between FY and Firewall and WAF fronted, can't you bring the two technologies together so we don't have these Sophie's choices?
Yeah, I can take that as a follow-up question. So again, this is more of looking like a roadmap kind of a question if we have any plan for that. So we won't be able to share that. But however, right now what we have is we have different services and we need to choose them as per the needs of the environment. That's what we can say as of today.
Great. Thank you, Shabazz, for that. Let me check here. We have 2 more minutes before ending this call, and I want to make sure. Okay, how to create a rule in Azure Firewall to allow / deny traffic based on a country region instead of whitelisting IP ranges?
I can answer that. So today Azure File doesn't have a feature that allows you to block IP addresses based on geolocation, right? We do have a blog post written maybe last year or so where we describe a workaround to block IP addresses based on geolocations, but that's a workaround. That's not really a geolocation filtered option that we have available for Azure Firewall today.
Great, thanks, Gustavo. And there's another WAF related. So do you really need firewall for web traffic when you have WAF?
Yeah, I can try to answer that one, Valen. So I think the question here is, we are already kind of protecting the back end using the web application firewall. So really, is there an additional need for the Azure firewall here? And what we talk about for the recommended best practices is putting that Azure firewall behind that application gateway as more of a deeper packet inspection, because it will do some type of man in the middle where it will take this encrypted type flow, decrypt it, inspect it against the IDPS engine. It will look through threat intelligence, and then if everything is clean, it will go through as well, just in case that there is anything, some type of malware, spyware, something that a layer 7 WAF would not try to look for. The layer 3, 4, layer 7 Azure firewall with IDPS and threat intelligence would then have that additional security evaluations that would go against that request. So that's kind of why you would still try to use an Azure firewall. It's not really a best practice of Microsoft. This is typical of WAF in front of a firewall in general. So yeah.
Thank you so much, David. Well, we have more questions coming in, but we are actually just a minute over the half of the hour here. And as mentioned, this is we have designated 30 minutes for this AMA. And thank you all to all of the SMEs who helped us with answering the questions and providing the resourceful information here today. Thank you all of you for joining today's session and for submitting your questions and the feedback. Please take a minute submitting your AMA feedback at aka.ms/securityAMA feedback. I have posted this link at the start of the call, so you might have to scroll up. For those of you who may have additional questions on the topic and the products we just covered, please feel free to raise them on our Microsoft Tech Community discussion space at aka.ms/ANS community. Also, this link has been posted at the beginning of the call. Thank you all for being part of our community, and we hope to see you next time. Goodbye.